6 o'clock. There may be some people joining us slightly later, as we were just discussing. But welcome to this evening's session for the History Festival, the Connecting Histories Project History Festival. It's really great to have such a good turnout already, and we've had a fantastic few sessions already this week, and everything's got off to a flying start. So it's really great to be here with you all this evening to present the session, What You Find Not Leaving a Stone Unturned. We've got 2 presentations for you this evening. The house rules were sent round to you in the email, so we're just going to reiterate that by saying if you could stay on mute during the presentations, that would be brilliant. And if you have any questions, if you could pop those into the chat box as they occur to you, and then I'll be able to feed those back to the speakers at the end of both papers. And perhaps call upon 1 or 2 of you to unmute and ask those yourselves. So yeah, just use the chat box. If anything comes to you, any comments, any questions, that would be great. So the first paper we have this evening is Reconstructing the Biography of Shlomo Rebbe Pearlman. And this will be presented by Rachel Lewis and David Pearlman. Rachel is one of the researchers for the Connecting Small Histories project, and she's been researching Sunderland. She grew up in Sunderland and left the city in 1994 for London. Rachel's been happy to reconnect with people she hasn't seen for some time. Hearing their recollections of Sunderland, she says, has been nostalgic and brought back many happy memories of her own. David was born in 1938 in Gateshead-on-Tyne, and was evacuated during the war to Bishop Auckland. He lived in Sunderland during his formative years from 1950 to 1957. He studied at Gateshead Yeshiva for a year, followed by 3 years at the London School of Economics. David worked as a chartered accountant and company agent. His main hobby is picture postcard collecting, with the collection being presented at the Hebrew University 2 years ago. So I invite Rachel and David to take it away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. It's so lovely to see everybody tonight. We've got such a good crowd, and lovely to see so many from Sunderland as well. I must say I've had the perfect lockdown project, which has been researching the Sunderland Jewish community on behalf of Connecting Small Histories for JSCN. I've thoroughly enjoyed the research, and in particular touching base with many people I haven't seen for some time. My cousin David Pearlman has always been interested in researching the personal history of the Sunderland community, and the numerous files he has given me are evidence of that. As part of the project, he sent me a copy of a bio he had written on our mutual grandfather, Rebbe Elia Shlomo Pearlman, and I am delighted to introduce David, who will tell you more.
Fine, thank you, friends. I must start by saying that I don't feel that I'm a historian. I have simply put together notes over the years. But in this, I've discovered a little about my grandfather, Shlomo Rebbe Pearlman, and I've discovered a man who was a gentle soul, a broad-minded man who believed in Shalom Bayit, that there should be peace and tranquility at home. He was born in 1882 in the small town of Virbalen in the southwest of Lithuania. And at the age of 18, he came to the UK with his mother and his brother and brothers and sisters. And they lived in Sunderland. But my starting interest in this was not Rebbe Pearlman himself. About 20 years ago, my uncle Yankel Pearlman, who lived at that time in Kiryat Atta in Israel, was interviewed by the Herzliya Times, and they wrote an article called "The Israeli Who Built the Bridge Over the River Kwai." And this was my uncle Yankel, who had been incarcerated with 3 other boys from Sunderland by the Japanese. And he wrote his story. This was when he was in his 80s. And at about the same time, there was a small booklet published by a cousin, Solly Cohen from Jerusalem, who in his 90s wrote a book called The Man in the Bowler Hat, about his reminiscences of his life in Sunderland. And it was this that started my interest in Sunderland history. I didn't want to leave it until I was in my late 80s or 90s before recording what I could about the family history. And so I started writing just notes about my own life. And this led me on inevitably to the rest of the family. And in particular, I found this intriguing story of our grandfather, Rebbe Shlomo Pearlman. When he came to the UK, there's no doubt that he had very little with him, no worldly possessions. He came with some books. This was one of them, Talmud Lashon Ivri, which is the rules of the Hebrew language. His interest was in the Hebrew language. And in particular, I should note that what he produced, what he showed me, the books that he had included this one, which was Safrut Yisrael, the literature, Jewish literature. But the remarkable thing is that these books were written not by rabbis. These were written by scholars of the Hebrew language. And the first point that I must make is that while he was extremely orthodox, he did not hesitate to take on, to read and learn from books that were produced by secular Jews, something which today would not be acceptable at all in the Orthodox community. So though the subject of what I'm going to say is about my grandfather, it really started, as I say, by general thoughts about the community and about how he lived in Sunderland. When he came with his knowledge of Hebrew and quickly became the Rebbe in the local Talmud Torah. That is, in the Orthodox community, the Hebrew classes held every day of the week, apart from Friday and Shabbat. He taught 2 hours every night to the boys of Sunderland. And this was for 40 years. He was something of a contradiction in many ways, but I will explain some of that when I tell you about how I put together his story. He brought with him his Hebrew books, and that's about the only information that I have on him, apart from his naturalization certificate from the year 1911, when he described himself as a general trader. When he first came, he joined his brother, his older brother Joseph, in business, and he became a bookkeeper, helping in the business of Joseph. This helped to give him some cash coming in, but he then became the Rebbe at the Hebrew classes, and that is at the Talmud Torah. All that I've learned about him came from all of the many stories that I learned from members of the family, from all the many cousins and uncles and aunts. I spoke with everyone that I could find. It included Yankel in Kiryat Atta, who confirmed that as a young boy, he was the one who went round the houses delivering the cakes from his mother, who was a specialist baker in town, but who did it privately to help families out. I spoke with my auntie Sheba, who told me about how on Friday afternoons, this learned man had to have his books, his cowboy comic books, that she went to the local library to get Western books about the cowboys and Indians, which was, this was part of the life of grandfather Shlomo Rebbe Pearlman. He seemed to love cowboys and Indians. Such a contradiction today when the Orthodox would say that reading anything other than holy literature on the Holy Sabbath was the only thing you should do. But he was a student of comic books, and he loved them. And Friday afternoons, the girls would go to the shops to buy his sweets, his boiled sweets, because he was a lifelong smoker. He was a chain smoker. He always had a cigarette in his mouth. I was told that when he was teaching in the Hebrew classes, the boys used to have a bet on how long the ash would stay on his cigarette until the ash fell onto his waistcoat. It was always a few minutes, but they had a bet on how long it would be. He was a gentle soul, a gentle teacher. He never, ever used corporal punishment on any of the boys. It was said that when he was unhappy with what the boys were learning, or those that couldn't grapple with the Hebrew language, he would put his hands on his chest, and he would beat himself as if it was his fault that anything was going wrong with their studies. One cousin, Michael Fox, remembered, he said, that this man, who was not paid particularly well as a teacher, would have pennies that he gave out when some of the pupils did particularly well. And he referred to these as pennies from heaven, which were given by Rebbe Pearlman to his students. They loved his work, which was for 40 years. He taught at the Hebrew classes, 40 years. And I must point out that Cecil Roth, in the introduction to the book on the Sunderland Hebrew congregation, this was the book by Roth, he does say that settlers from Lithuania perpetuated their ideals and created in this country, and in particular in Sunderland, more so than anywhere else in the world, in the UK that is, the incorporating all the right traditions of Judaism with in the midst of the English way of life. Rebbe Pearlman was the one who did this, and I wanted to say that I'm astonished that in the book by Arnold Levy, that my grandfather is not mentioned at all, even though this is exactly what he did. He was at the heart of the community in perpetuating the traditions and teaching so many hundreds of boys over the years. I'm very proud of my grandfather because of this combination of the old and the new. He was new to the life in Sunderland. The whole family was, of course, had lived in Lithuania possibly for 100 or 200 years. The tradition of the family is that we go back to Spain and back probably to Babylon as well. So over the centuries, our family have wandered around Europe, living in Virbalen, and then coming to live in Sunderland. I will end here just by saying this point that I admire the man for having completed his Hebrew education in Virbalen, continued with all of these traditions in Sunderland. And I'm proud that he was one of those who helped to promote the Judaism combined with modern living that we all now enjoy. I'm ready to answer any questions, and I hope I've given you some indication of the man of Sunderland. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That's lovely. Any questions, anybody?
I think we might save the questions until the end, Rachel, if that's okay. And if anyone has any questions that they could think of now, that if they could pop them in the chat box, that would be really great. Rachel, was there anything that you would like to add to that? And perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about your role in the project, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I crashed out about halfway through, David. I'm so sorry. My battery, I mustn't have had it plugged in properly. My battery went dead. So I missed some of it and I'm really upset. Is this going to be recorded? Will I be able to catch it somewhere?
Yes, it's being recorded, everyone, and it will be posted on the Heritage Hub in just a couple of weeks.
Okay. At the beginning of lockdown, I saw a notice on the Sunderland Facebook that JSEN were looking for, or they were holding a meeting for small communities with the idea of doing some research, and Sunderland was one of them. So I thought, okay, I haven't got to go very far, switched my machine on and zoomed in. And I just thought it sounded fascinating. Wasn't sure what I could do because I've never done any sort of research in this way whatsoever before. Never really been, as David said, I'm not a historian either. But Trish got in touch with me and she said if I was happy to contact people, which I was, and just get people's thoughts and memories of what they did when they lived in the town, why they came to the town if they weren't born there, why they left, just to get an idea of the movement within the town and away from the town. So I've spent the really fun year researching, catching up with people, chatting and bringing back, as Tony said, some lovely memories for me.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you for all the research that you've done on the project as well. It's been fascinating to read and catch up on. I joined the project in January, taking over from the original project officer. So it's been really wonderful to catch up and read everything that people on the team have already produced. So do tune into the Heritage Hub, everybody, as well, because there will be articles produced on there for you to read, and also the project book, which I'm sure Ed can tell you more about at the end of the session. If you haven't heard about it already, a book is being produced based on the research that Rachel and the others have produced, and sharing more of the interesting stories. So thank you both for that. We've got some questions coming in, but as I said, I'll save those until the end. So slightly ahead of schedule, which is wonderful. We are going to move on now to Dawn Waterman's paper. Dawn's going to be talking to us about the Hidden Treasures Project and Heirlooms. And the Hidden Treasures Project is actually one of the History Festival's partners. We've invited several projects and organisations to come alongside us to help us publicise this event. And it's been really wonderful to work alongside these great projects and sort of share in publicity and audiences and things like this. So Dawn is the Archives and Heritage Manager for the Board of Deputies for British Jews. Dawn developed the Hidden Treasures Project, a celebration of Jewish archives in Britain. The project showcases collections from across the UK that tell the story of Jews and their experiences in Britain. It also helps communities and individuals discover and preserve their own stories. So Dawn's going to do a presentation on that now, and I believe there's a short musical video at the end of that as well. So take it away, Dawn.
Great. First of all, I wanted to, can we do it so that people can see the, that's it, perfect. That's it. So as Tony said, I'm Dawn. I'm the Archives and Heritage Manager at the Board of Deputies, and that's the democratically elected body that represents the UK's Jewish community to government, to the media, and to the diplomatic community. So really thanks very, very much to Tony and the Jewish Small Communities Network for inviting me to say something about the Hidden Treasures Project, this fantastic history festival. In particular, kind of following on really from David and Rachel, I'd like to talk about the Your Treasures strand of the project, where we encourage members of the public to send in their own Jewish treasures, Jewish heirlooms, ones that tell the story of their families. So maybe first of all, bit about hidden treasures. At the board, we're really proud to be leading on hidden treasures. Celebrating Jewish archives in Britain. I mean, it does what it says on the tin, really. It celebrates the archives that tell the stories of Britain, of Jews in Britain. And we do this by featuring treasures from the archives, by having events, including a Jewish Heirlooms roadshow with our very own Fiona Bruce, and doing presentations like this one. I'd be really interested to hear from you if there are any archives I've missed. David, in particular, I'm going to ask you if there are archives I should be approaching. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts and comments. So far we've got around 50 archives. We've described the archive on our website, which is up there, celebratingjewisharchives.org. I do encourage you to have a look and to follow us on social media at See the Treasures, if that's the sort of thing you do. So we link directly to the website so the visitors can explore themselves, really. We've got some very large archives. The government's National Archive, which probably is where David found his ancestors' naturalisation certificates, the Imperial War Museum, the British Library, the Tate, the BFI, small archives like the Nicholas Winton archive. You remember Nicholas Winton, who brought the children from Prague on the Kindertransport. Specifically Jewish archives, the big ones, I guess, that you might know about, the Wiener Holocaust Library, Jewish museums in London and Manchester, the AJR, the Association of Jewish Refugee Voices, Scottish and Welsh Jewish archives, but also much smaller ones too. There's a great small archive called Jews of the RAF, and we were there too. I think they're one of the partners, aren't they, for this history festival, and a terrific small archive called hesped.org, which is a collection of eulogies given at Jewish funerals and shivers. We've got a number of university archives, UCL, Manchester and Southampton, very important archive that, Leeds, Hull, Sussex, Queen's University, Belfast, and a lot of local archives. Archives where there are or there were Jewish communities, Tyne and Wear, of course, Birmingham, Leeds, Plymouth, Liverpool, the London Metropolitan Archive, and lots of London boroughs. And our media partner is the Jewish Chronicle. We say that we've got treasures from, or our archives have treasures from the 11th century to the current day. So first of all, I think I'll show you just a few of the treasures from some of the archives in the Hidden Treasures Network, really just to kind of whet your appetite. And in deference to my Sunderland colleagues, I'm staying in the north of England, though Hidden Treasures archives stretch for the whole of England, and of course Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, which have important Jewish stories to tell as well. Can we have the first slide, Zoe? That's it. So this one is from the Liverpool Record Office. It's the wedding photograph of the Clumpus, Finestone and Bennett families around 1900. It's from the, within the Liverpool Record Office, they've got the Merseyside Jewish Community Archive. And they've got personal papers, community records, going back to 1722. Liverpool was the first organised Jewish community in the north of England.
Okay, we're having some technical difficulties, everyone. Please bear with. Zoe, is there anything you can do from your end?
I'm just trying now. Hang on. I'm just going to stop sharing and see if I can do something. I don't think she's in here anymore.
Okay. Ed, would you be able to tell us a bit about the project book, just whilst we're waiting to reconnect for those that haven't heard about it yet?
Absolutely, yes. So whilst we've been undertaking the project, and all our volunteers have been gathering the research and doing some fantastic work and developing lots of stories, we thought, well, where are they going to go? They could go onto the website, but originally we were going to hold the History Festival actually as a physical thing here in Manchester, and bring people to Manchester and to be able to have objects and look at research and things like that. And as we can't, we decided it would be great for all these stories to have some sort of record that people could take away. And so we've turned it into a book, and Trish Skinner has been our lead historian and worked really, really hard on gathering all that together and putting it into some sort of order. And I'm currently working on the graphic design of the book and pulling it together. We did have a little photograph, so I don't know if Dawn is back with us, but if she isn't, I will just go and see if I can hunt out a little preview of it, if I can find it. And yes, I'm going to share the screen. And so we hope that the cover is going to look a little bit like this. And we have the contents of lots of different stories, lots of different themes within the book, within the research which has been going on. Have we got Dawn back with us yet, Zoe? No? Okay, I'll go on a little bit further. I can give you a quick whiz through. This is not designed, but it's just a preview. No, that's not it. Right. So we have a button on the website, on the program page, the History Festival page, where if you want to make a donation, you can. We'll give you a book in return once we've got it printed. And here is a little bit of what it's going to look like in rough form. I'm just going to whiz through. We've got around about 60 odd pages, timelines of what's been going on, life in different communities. You're going to be hearing from Jane Warner on Monday. So there's a bit of the research that she's conducted there. It's going to be fascinating to hear about the mayor of Taunton, who was Jewish. So that's just a little teaser. Hilary Thomas's research on St. Anne's, which has drawn my personal family history into the project, which I wasn't expecting, but I've now embraced. And so that's just a little taste of, you see, I've only got a third of the way through, and quite a lot going on there. So if you're interested in that, or you'd just like to make a donation to our charity, just click that button, and we'll be very pleased to send you a copy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ed. Whilst we're waiting for Dawn to reconnect, Zoe, perhaps you could give us a thumbs up when that's taken place. We're going to take the questions now for David and Rachel. So coming from Deborah Pearlman, she says, how did Rebbe Shlomo relate to the wider community in Sunderland? Oh, I think you're muted, David, sorry.
Yes, he was specifically the Rebbe at the Beis HaMedrash. There were two synagogues in Sunderland, one that was referred to as the Englischer, which happened to be the older community, but the new community was the Beis HaMedrash, which was set up in the 1890s. He was the Rebbe only of the Talmud Torah, which was part of the Beis HaMedrash. In other words, he was not really a Rebbe for the whole of the Jewish community, but only for the members of the Beis HaMedrash. But this was the Orthodox community, and the one that gained the fame, and the one that Arnold Levy in his book refers to as being exceptionally Orthodox and known throughout the country. So he really was specifically a Rebbe only at that shul, and had little or nothing to do with the Englischer shul. In fact, there was quite a divide between the two synagogues. I remember years ago when Chaim Bermant used to write about, in the Jewish Chronicle, about small communities. He had actually stayed in Sunderland as one of the representatives of Bnei Akiva, and he was living in Sunderland, and he talked about the two communities, one which never talked to the other. There were just two rival synagogues in this small town. And Rebbe Pearlman was the Rebbe only of the Beis HaMedrash.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. We have Dawn back now. Yeah. Sorry about that. So we'll continue with our presentation, return to the questions shortly. So thank you, everyone. I've got a note of those, and thank you, David, for your answer there. So over to you.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened there. It just disconnected. Don't know why. So we had the Liverpool. We have that. We just need the next one. That's it. Perfect. Perfect. So getting back to some of the archives in Hidden Treasures. This one's from the Leeds Jewish Community Archive, which is administered by MACOR, the Jewish Cultural Centre. It shows proscenium players who were a Leeds-based Jewish amateur stage group from the 1960s. It kept going until the 1990s, actually. Pictured there is Jerry Rich, John Fisher, who's the man in the middle, who's the kind of official chronicler of the group, Peter Buntman. In fact, Barry Cry, you know, the comedian, he was a proscenium player. So we move to the next one. Apparently people can't see the screen share. I can see it.
Can everyone see this?
I can.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's assume that we're okay. So this is
apologies then.
Good. Okay. This is from the Isle of Man. It shows a group of holiday makers, actually, from either Manchester or Liverpool, who are having a holiday on the Isle of Man in 1956. Now, the holiday makers are very obviously Jewish, but what's interesting is that the hotel itself was used as an internment camp for enemy aliens, including Jews, during World War II. So here you have a group of Jewish people going on holiday to a hotel that was once an internment camp for Jews, which I think is kind of interesting. If we have the next one. This is a really very special archive, the Holocaust Survivors Friendship Association in Huddersfield. Arik Hirsch, who's the second on the left in the back row, was is interviewed in the Holocaust Survivors Friendship Association. It's a group of testimonies and records of Holocaust survivors and refugees who made their life in the north of England. He's in the football team in 1953, and it seemed to me it's really I find it quite poignant that here's a young man doing exactly what young men should be doing, playing football, when he's had really terrible experiences. Then the next one, please. I love this, and it reminds me of the kind of detective work that David was telling us about. We have to kind of identify the person. It's from the records of the Hull Jewish community. It's the Rover Club around 1936. Pecky Gordon, Sonny Waxman, and Billy Sugarman, all members of the team. So if we go to the next one, Your Treasures is a strand of the Hidden Treasures project. We invited members of the public to send in images of their own treasures to tell us really the story of the treasures if they can. Lockdown's been a really good time for sorting things out. I don't know if you found that, but I certainly have. We've had the most fantastic response, actually. We've had, spice boxes, pictures of candlesticks, school attendance medals, a lot of Holocaust era letters, passports with the letter J in them, immigration papers. And also this one, which was taken by the World Jewish Photographic Agency, was sent in by the son of the third lady from the left and the lady in glasses at the front. A lady called Rachel Feinstein. It's an event at the Princess Wales Lodge, number 25, ladies in brackets. Don't know who the poor chap there is. Oh, there are a couple of chaps on there. Anyway, husbands, I expect. It was affiliated to a mutual self-help alliance of friendly societies, which acted as a kind of safety net in times of sickness before the establishment the welfare state. In fact, we had so many treasures. If we go to the next one, we had so many treasures that people sent in that we made an online event about them. We called it the Jewish Heirlooms Roadshow, kind of Hamisher Antiques Roadshow, with Gillian Merrin, who's our chief executive, as our kind of Fiona Bruce figure. We had 3 members of the public and three experts. You can watch it on our website, actually, if you'd like to. I watched it this morning again. Really marvelous. This young man is Joel Salmon, who's with his grandpa, Tony Freeman. And if we look at the next slide, Joel sent in some pictures of Tony's medals. The one on my right, so the purple and green one, is from the Malay expedition in 1950s, and the one on the other side, the blue and yellow one, is the commemorative for national service. Joel also sent in a prayer book, a small buff prayer book, which was issued to service people. I find it really quite moving, actually. There's the prayer that you say before you go into battle, the prayer for the dead, our prayer for the dying, and it was issued to members of Her Majesty's forces. If we move on to the next one, quite a different period. So that was from the medals and the military book were from the prayer book were from the 1950s. This one's from the early 19th century. It's a mole book, the ceremony of the circumcision, and also the register of the people that its owner circumcised. It belonged to a chap called Andrew who sent it in, and it belonged to his, we think, great-great-great-great-grandfather, but it might have been one more great in there. He was Reverend Moses Joel, born in 1788, and he was the reader and the mole in Edinburgh. This page tells you, this gives you a list of the people, of the boys that he circumcised. The book runs from 1830 to 1860. And Andrew discussed it with David Jacobs, who I think has been involved with this history project. He talked about earlier Portsmouth and Sephardi and Portuguese circumcision registers. If we go to the next one. The next one, we had a little bit of stardust in our Hidden Treasures Antiques Roadshow, our Jewish Heirlooms Roadshow. The broadcaster Nick Ross took part. He had a suitcase really of treasures actually from his father, whose name was Hans Rosenblut, and who was one of the people sent on the Dunera, the British ship, which transported thousands of so-called enemy aliens to Australia during the Second World War. This is a birthday card that was painted by Hans's colleagues in Hut 26. They were known, the people in this particular hut, as the Roebucks. You can see a little picture of a roebuck after a pub in Richmond, apparently, and that's a picture of Nick's father, Hans. His mother in the background waving goodbye from Britain. I think it's really rather beautiful. You can see the date there, June the 4th, 1941. The next one. The next one I think is also very beautiful. Again, a completely different era. Can you guess what it is? Can you see? It's what they call a mizrach. You put it on the wall of your house, on the eastern wall, to show you where to pray to. It was made by a lady called Jessica's great grandfather in the Ukraine in 1858. The Hebrews say, you know, from the rising of the sun to its setting, praised is the name of Hashem. I think it's very. She's had it kind of restored and proudly displayed in her house. The next one. Oh yes, because Passover is coming very shortly, rather too quickly actually for my liking. Somebody sent in a picture of a Seder plate that they had at home, manufactured by Ridgway in England around 1925. Very, very beautiful. And so if we go to the next one, which is mine actually, it belongs to me, my treasure, my own family treasure. It's one of the actually only two postcards that my father received in London from his parents, who were at that point in the Warsaw Ghetto. He had been sent to safety on the King's Transport. They had been deported from Germany back to Poland, where of course they were murdered. And for me, it's a very, very, very sacred family treasure, family heirloom, and it tells a Jewish story. So if we take the next one. So that's Hidden Treasures. I've given you a little bit of a flavour of it. Do send, if you've got heirlooms at home, I'm sure you have, do send in pictures. We're hoping to do another Jewish Heirlooms Roadshow. And so thank you very much indeed for listening. Thank you. And I'm sorry about the technical hitch earlier. Thanks. Bye.
Did you want to share? Do you want me to share the video as well at the end? Would you like to share?
We can do it now or later, whatever you fancy.
That'd be lovely, Zoe, if you don't mind, and then we'll take questions after the video, Dawn, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, sure, I'll do that now.
So this is just a little thing we put together about some of the heirlooms that people had sent in. A little musical diversion. So that's the event that I mentioned.
Can everyone see that before I play it?
there's the prayer you can say before you go into battle.
Is there supposed to
There
be
should be
sound
some
though?
sound. Yeah, there should be. No?
Yeah, sorry, the sound's coming with me. I'm not sure why it's not playing.
Oh,
I'll
never
share
mind.
computer. Hang on. I'll go to the beginning again. No worries.
Oh,
You hear it now?
That was lovely done. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's always really nice to hear a bit of music in amongst these sorts of presentations. It definitely breaks things up a bit. Thank you. And for sharing those wonderful images as well. I'd just like to start with a question of my own, if I may. As part of the roadshow, and obviously you encourage people to email in, I assume, with other artifacts and things that they might have, heirlooms. Do you offer any advice to them at all on how to or where to archive those things, so how to preserve them and protect them for the future?
Well, so far, let's think. Lots of people have written in with kind of asking questions about their heirlooms, and I've answered them as well as I can. I'm not sure that there have really been very many that I've thought really ought to be in an archive somewhere. To be honest, they're mostly very precious to the person that they belong to. People haven't asked me, where can I give this to? Quite the opposite, actually. Most of them have said, in fact, some of them have thought maybe I'm asking them to send it to them, and and they said they'd really rather not do that because the treasure is such a treasure to them.
Of course. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. I'll move on to a question for David now. Do you know why Rebbe Shlomo left Verbalen? How do you say that? Sorry, my pronunciation's not brilliant.
Virbalen. Veerballen.
Veerballen. Thank you very much.
Veerballen in Lithuanian.
Wonderful. Do you know why he left?
He left, I believe, around about 1898. His father died, and the father being the main breadwinner, his eldest brother, Joseph, had already been conscripted into the army of the Tsar and served in the regiment in the Kovno area. And there were rumors at the time that there was going to be some really upset in the Far East between Russia and Japan, which in fact turned out to be so a few years later. And there was the terrible fear that if boys went into the army, and all boys had to go into the army at the age of 18, that Shlomo would also be now conscripted. With his brother Joseph already in the army, it was probably anticipated that they'd be lost forever to Judaism. And an uncle of theirs had come to the northeast of England some 30 years earlier, a guy called Levy, and he invited them to come to England. He said, it's a good place to come. No conscription in the army, easy to make a living here. And so the family uprooted in 1899 and 1900 and came to the northeast of England, across the North Sea from Memel, the port of Memel, and straight to North Shields, where they all landed and then spread around the northeast of England. But it was really this. It was primarily then because of the difficulties of making ends meet. They no longer had regular income in the family. And this was a new opportunity, as with many millions of others who were leaving the Russian Empire at that time. And England was one of the places that they found was very welcoming.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And on a similar note then, Trish asks, did Rebbe Pearlman have an official title? She suggests that perhaps this is why Arnold Levy might have missed him out of his publication, since many histories start from institutional records.
Well, yes, I think Arnold Levy's Arnold Levy's book gives the facts of history, but Rebbe Pearlman never had any official title. He did not have semicha. He was not a qualified rabbi. There was the interesting story from the 1930s, which was that the rabbi each evening gave his 1-hour lecture. It was known as the Blatt meaning the page. So he took one page of the Talmud, and many senior members of the community joined him for that Blatt. It was said the rabbi, if he was not able to attend and give his lecture, he was able to ask the chazan of the shul to take the lecture instead, because the chazan had semicha. And it was also said that if the rabbi and the chazan were not able to do so, they asked the shamus of the shul to come and take the lesson, because he was also a qualified rabbi. But of all these qualified rabbis in the northeast of England, Shlomo Rebbe Pearlman never had any semicha. He was not qualified. He was simply known affectionately as Rebbe Pearlman, the teacher.
In fact, we had somebody email in, I'm not sure if they're with us this evening, but they remember him. There's a family connection to Rebbe Shlomo as the teacher, as their teacher. So if that is you that emailed in, please leave a message in the comments box, because we'd love to hear from you. Okay, so a question for Dawn. Does the project cover only physical archives? Presumably this might mean, has there been any investigation into digital archives or anything alternative to physical archive?
Yeah, most definitely it does cover digital archives. We've got a number of, so Sephardi Voices UK, that's all digital. No, there are quite a few actually kind of oral history type projects. There's one in St Albans that's completely digital. I think Jews in the RAF, that's completely digital. Hesped.org, I mean, really quite a few of them are digital only, which is terrific. I mean, and certainly in this kind of lockdown, it's been an absolute godsend for people to be able to explore the archives. without actually having to go there. So yes, most definitely. Digital
Brilliant.
way forward.
So would this include the Sunderland Facebook page that was mentioned earlier? Have you looked at sort of archives in that respect?
No, I haven't actually. That's a good thought, though. I guess
That was Trish's thought, just to put a pin in that there.
To include, that's an interesting thought. It's not one that I've had or come across. That's a thought.
In terms of the digital archive side of things, we do have a paper on that as part of the History Festival next week. We'll be looking at digital archives and moving what was initially intended to be a physical exhibition onto an online platform in response to the COVID restrictions. So do tune in for that as well if you would like. Okay, what other questions do we have here? Hilary, would you unmute yourself and ask your question to David and Rachel? Is she still with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, hi.
Sorry. Yes. I was just asking David, I hadn't realised at the beginning that Rebbe Pearlman's father was not alive. I just wondered how he had made his living. And the other question was Rebbe Pearlman in any other sort of employment? Because traditionally, Cheder teachers are very poorly paid.
Well, yes, he was poorly paid. His first job when he came to the northeast of England was working as a bookkeeper for his brother, his elder brother, Joseph, who had set up in business. So, and I think almost throughout his life, he was also a part-time bookkeeper anyway. So you're quite right. The payment of his wage as a teacher was very modest indeed. One of the funny stories that I heard was from one of his pupils who remembered him with his cigarette in his mouth, with his wages in his pocket, in his trouser pocket. The coins, he jingled them with his hands, and he stood there all through the lesson, jingling his wages for the week, which at the end of the lesson, and when he went home, all went to his wife straight away for the housekeeping.
And his cigarettes.
Thank you. Deborah asks David, when can we look forward to your memoir?
To what? To my memoir? Well,
Yes.
I've given some of my notes to Rachel. She's already been plowing through them, because really I accumulated notes on all of the family, and in particular my grandfather and his brother Joseph, who were the pillars of the community. But they're all handwritten or personally typed. So Rachel, I think, will be able to help some of the family members if they want to have some of the facts that I've accumulated.
It would be lovely to have them written up, David.
Oh, I'm actually going to do something on Bishop Auckland, aren't I? When you were evacuated during the war.
Well, Bishop Auckland was an intriguing little town. No Jews who lived there, apparently, until about 1940. And suddenly, refugees from all parts of the UK, in particular the northeast, came to live there, and a few refugees from the south of England as well, plus quite a community of Germans who came from Germany as refugees. And so the small town of Bishop Auckland had a Jewish life of some 10 years or so, from 1940s to the 1950s. It's an intriguing story. It has its own cemetery. It had a benefactor, a Mr. Lewin, who set up the West Auckland Clothing Company, he being a refugee from Germany. And so it was a busy little community, but it had only that limited life of a few years during the war and immediately after.
I think that the community lasted a little bit longer than after the war in Bishop Auckland. Somebody's put a comment on about the refugee families They were mainly in clothing manufacture. A lot of them were Marks and Spencer manufacturers. There was a belt manufacturer, Lewins, as you mentioned. They've all been written up in various publications about the refugee families. And there was a family from Germany who lived in Newcastle, had a clothing business, the Dressel family in Bishop Auckland. You know, it went on. There was the Gatto family lived there till the children were in their, well, late, well, nearly teens, and the children went to Cheder in Newcastle every week. So that community lasted a little bit longer than you mentioned.
Well, I only knew it until about 1950, when we then went back to live in Sunderland. But I didn't know of any of its later life.
My husband managed Marks and Spencer there as well, after most of the community had left, but the Lewins were still there, and they were very influential in the town. And the Dressel family would still have their clothing shop there. And there was also a family who lived in Newcastle who had children's, I should put my camera on really, who had a children's clothing shop there. So it was actually quite a good little community, however it started, and it went on for a while, and then the people either died off or spread out to other parts of the northeast. One of the belt manufacturer, and I can't actually remember his name at the moment, was one of the people who came to England on the St. Louis. People might know of that story of the ship that went around. Sadly, and the countries wouldn't take the refugees from Germany. So one of those people actually ended up in Bishop Auckland and set up a factory there.
Interesting.
That's fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing. Do you have, David or Rachel, do you have an understanding of why the Sunderland community diminished so quickly? It's one of the questions we've had.
I've got my theory, yes.
Oh, let's hear it.
I blame the baby boomers. I think before the war, and what's his name, Slater, Charlie Slater's story tells this. He was made to go to university in Newcastle so that he could just travel to and from the university, not sort of live away from home. But I think after the war, girls as well as boys were encouraged to go to university. They were encouraged to go off away from Sunderland, and they never came back. And one or two stayed and married, and the younger community was quite thriving in sort of the 60s and 70s. But then by the time those children started to grow up, they went away, and their parents, who were sort of the baby boomers age, also left and followed their children, and that was it, downhill all the way.
Yes, I found the same. I think it was education. Everyone wanted to go to university,
Yeah.
or if not to university, to at least work somewhere else. My sister didn't go to university, but she wanted to come and work in London, so she came to London. I came to London to study. I remember sharing a flat in northwest London with David Berg, who was from the Berg family, Berg's Bikes in Sunderland. And we also felt very sorry for him, that he, for certain family reasons, was obliged to go back to Sunderland after his studies to stay with the family in Sunderland. We thought this was unbelievable that he somehow had the ill fate to have to go back to live in Sunderland when no one wanted to be there anymore.
Gosh, thank you very much. Dawn, you had some comments to make in response to a question from Howard in the chat. Could you?
Yeah, well, so Howard was talking about, in the chat, advice to communities and synagogues about the sort of thing that they might think about archiving. And in fact, yes, we have done that. If you have a look on the Hidden Treasures website, you'll see some advice. We did in October, actually, we did an event all about synagogue archives. And in fact, I'm assuming, David, you and Rachel, you know about the Lahav project in Tyne
No.
archives? No.
No,
Okay, so as far as the Le Havre project at the Tyne archives is chronicling the history of Jews in the northeast. So I think that could be. I'll put you in touch with their people, because that would be useful source for you. But as part of that event, we did some. We got Nicola Avery, who's the chief she's in charge of the Jewish collection at the London Metropolitan Archive, and she's done kind of top 10 tips for synagogues, what they should be keeping, what they shouldn't, who might be interested in it, and who wouldn't. I mean, local archives will be interested in the records of a synagogue, and it's minutes of meetings. That's what they're.
I was about to ask if the minute books were included in that. They seem to have come up quite a lot in the last few sessions about the fact that they're not found by researchers in any sort of usable state, or often misplaced, as Hilary said. Yes, yeah. So that's interesting. It's good that there's a best practice being put in place.
I know that the not a synagogue, obviously, but the minute books of the Board of Deputies are at the LMA. They've got the very first ones, which are written in Portuguese by the deputados of the time. But yes, so Nicola's got her top 10 tips. So I did urge you to have a look at those.
Wonderful. Perhaps you could put the link to that in the chat box, Dawn. That would be great. Thank you. Anne, you have your hand up. So if you'd like to unmute and ask your question, you're welcome.
No, basically, I'm just talking about the Sunderland community. I was born in 1950 in Sunderland. My maiden name was Gordon, if anyone, loads of you know my family. I wish we could all see maiden names, to be honest, because we don't always know where we all fit in. To cut a long story short, in 68, I left Sunderland along with a lot of, for the very same reasons, education, a bit of a wider life than Sunderland offered, though at the time it was a very good way to grow up. I actually eventually lived in Israel, got married, had a son, and came back to Sunderland in 75, when there was a menorah school, Jewish menorah school, which there hadn't always been a school, but I then had a daughter. Both my children went to the Jewish school, which was huge at the time because there was a yeshiva, there was a kollel, all the kollel children went to the menorah school. It was at the time, without putting too fine a point on it, where the religious and the not so religious were beginning to drift apart, and the kollel didn't want their children mixing with our children. Even though we were all Shomer Shabbat, we were all kosher, it wasn't enough for them. It was at a stage where the kollel and the yeshiva were getting frommer and frommer, and they all moved to Newcastle, and the menorah school became not viable. And in 1983, the menorah school closed. So all of us who had young children and wanted a Jewish education and not just going to Cheder twice a week, we all moved to Manchester, to Leeds, to London, and then there was a handful of people left who didn't have school-age children, and then the parents who didn't have school-age children followed their children to London and Manchester and Israel, and then it was just retired people left until the shul became not viable. And when that closed, that was the end of Sunderland. Well, one shul, the Bais Medrash amalgamated with the Riot Road shul, and the Riot Road shul carried on for a while. In fact, I was at the last weekend service at the Riot Road shul, which was very emotional. Dorothy was there, I think Rachel was there. Yeah. Loads of people on the site tonight will have been there. And that was the demise of Sunderland, the moving of the kollel and the yeshiva to Gateshead and the closing of the menorah school. Because by that stage, we all wanted a Jewish education for our children. So that's maybe just added a little more to what happened in the 80s.
I think
That's
another
brilliant. Thank you, Anne. Oh, sorry, Dorothy. Carry on.
sorry, another reason for the demise was, apart from education and people leaving at 18 and not coming back, economic situation. The businesses closed, and there were no family businesses for people to continue down the generations to work in. So I think that's quite an important factor.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I haven't got a record of any other questions, so if you do have any further ones, please put them in the chat now and I can pass those on. Or Cynthia, you have your hand up. Sorry, it's a bit difficult to see on the gallery thing. So Cynthia, if you'd like to unmute, then please go ahead.
Thank you. I have sort of an unrelated question that I was hoping for help with. I've been reading about the York Jewish community that has sort of revived itself. And I'm wondering if that sort of initiative is happening in any of the other communities that once were home to Jewish populations and are no longer, but Jews are taking interest now in coming back.
Maybe I can answer that, Tony. So the York community did have an Orthodox community, which you quite rightly say diminished, and then a group of really younger families based around the university. So it's pretty much an academic community with others added on, really, arose, and they took a pragmatic view and got the backing of liberal Judaism to support them in creating the community there. Of course, the community goes back to medieval times and to the massacre at Clifton Tower. But there are other communities which arise out of almost nowhere. So, for instance, in Lancaster, I don't actually know of any history of a legacy community there, but about 10, 15 years ago, somebody who lived in Lancaster said, well, I'm sure I'm not the only Jew in the village, and set about finding other people. And she found the person who had been working opposite her for 3 years, the desk facing her, turned out to be Jewish. And they actually created a brand new community. So that's Lancaster and Lakes, which you can find listed on the JICN website. Many of the communities have been there for a very long time and have kind of faded away. But others cling on, like Cheltenham, which has a very old and very beautiful synagogue. And Plymouth and Exeter are still there. The two of the oldest synagogues, Ashkenazi synagogues in the country, or perhaps even in Europe. And there are small groups getting together, even around the country. And I think post-pandemic, we might actually see a movement towards that as people realize that they don't want to live in the expensive city suburbs. But that's for years to come. So I hope that gives a little bit of an idea. But many of the small communities have been there for a very long time. And despite the fact that they have older communities, they seem to have gone through the generations and generations of older communities. And so, for instance, Harrogate has a retirement community, which is growing at quite a rate. So they don't just fade away without the kids being there. And nobody can quite explain why.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Trish, you have a question for Dawn. Perhaps you'd like to unmute and ask her.
Yeah, Dawn, obviously people have responded really brilliantly to your requests for them to bring treasures, send you pictures. Does the project then just include everything it's been said, or have you had to make decisions about what to include and exclude? Are there like highlights or things that you've had lots and lots of the same thing?
I wouldn't say there were lots and lots of the same thing. We've had a few candlesticks. We have had a few pictures of candlesticks. We've had no, I wouldn't say we've had a lot of the same thing. No, we've been very, very pleased to receive whatever people have sent us. Obviously, some people have know a huge amount about their heirloom, and other people know nothing at all. But no, we haven't. I wouldn't say we've had to exclude anything really.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And another one for Dawn: is there a search function across the Jewish archives and across the artifacts that you've collected as well?
Not across the artifacts, but across the archives, yes. You can search by, if you have a look on the website, you'll see, but you can search by subjects and by eras as well. So yes, there is.
Fantastic. Thank you
I
very
don't know
much.
if there anyone who's got any suggestions of archives that we haven't got. That's what I'm kind of interested in. And maybe
well, Dawn, you're sort of focusing on archives, and we're focusing on projects. They overlap sometimes, quite obviously, but between the two of us, I think we are starting to make these gateways into all these other, sources of research which have been going on. And so at the moment, I think what Hidden Treasures is doing and what JSCN Connecting Small Histories is doing is a bit unique in this country, at least, and probably, well, I don't know, within Europe. But the next step, I suppose, is to link into the European heritage organisations, and certainly, sort of, we did have Victor Sorensen as a guest the other week, and no doubt we'll be making links with them.
Right.
Brilliant. So unless there are any more questions, we've got a little bit of time. There have been some recommendations of archives within the chat, so we'll make sure that you get a copy of that just in case they're ones that you haven't yet explored.
Quite hard.
Jacqueline, did you?
Follow chat at the same time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
That's fine. We'll send it through to you. Jacqueline, go ahead.
I was just curious to know, do you have ketubas, or have you got so many that you didn't show any?
No, we haven't actually. We haven't got any at all.
Oh, I've got one then back.
Have you?
I think from
I'd love to see a
1917. Yes.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
Brilliant.
You're welcome.
So if anyone does have an heirloom they wanted to share, do they just email in on that email address, Dawn? Is that right?
Yeah. There's a form on the Hidden Treasures website, so you'll see. Or get in touch with me.
Marvellous.
Dawn.waterman@bod.org.uk.
Great, thank you. Yes, please do pop it in the chat. Okay, in that case then, unless there was anything else, is there a register of registries? Sorry, there's just one more come in, so you feel free to leave that there for the minute. There are, yeah, okay. There we are, simple answer. Okay, so thank you so much everybody for attending this evening. Thank you to our speakers and for everything that you've shared this evening. It's been really fascinating, interesting stuff. I encourage all of you to come back tomorrow at 6 o'clock for Thursday's History Festival session, which is called Orchestras and War, Sunshine and Sussex. And we've got two great papers there following a similar format to this evening. So we've got one of our project volunteers, Anne Goldstein, who will be sharing more about her research on Eastbourne with some musical entertainment as well. So I really encourage you to tune into that. And Dr. Diana Wilkins will be talking about the Heritage Project Shalom Sussex. So thank you very much, and we hope to see more of you again tomorrow or other sessions. Okay, take care.
Hey.
Thank you for sharing, Tony.
Thank you.